Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to be talking about Venus's upcoming opposition to Pluto. Now, this is an opposition that is taking place as Mars is still engaging with a square to Saturn, and Mars is also pretty close to turning retrograde. And what that means is that Venus and Saturn and Venus and Mars are also starting to get into conversation with one another. So we'll take a broad look at what it means when Venus is put through the ringer, so to speak, and see what that might promise us in the next couple of weeks. So let's go ahead and give you a look at the real time clock. So, all right, here we go. Now you're going to see Venus is about 19 degrees of Cancer, closing in on about 20 degrees today, and is therefore moving into that 3-degree range with Pluto, who is at about 22 degrees of Capricorn. And then you're going to see it very quickly. Venus is moving into the opposition with Saturn and the simultaneous square with Mars. You can see the Mars-Saturn square already there. Now, one way in which we are seeing Mars in the news right now, especially in the square with Pluto and Saturn, and that trifecta of Jupiter in its fall and Pluto and Saturn, which we've been talking about all year, and which has been so much a part of not only the political unrest and the pandemic and issues of systemic racism and police brutality and things like that. But, you know, I find it very interesting that, and I've been saying this for a while, if you've watched my channel at all, that I anticipated that because of the pandemic or whatever else, that the upcoming Mars retrograde might mean some interesting forms of reversal or delay or serious transformation in the world of professional sports. And I included this among a variety of different things that I've talked about with Mars's long stay in Aries for the rest of this year. I'm mentioning this as a precursor to talking about Venus and Pluto, so I'll get there in a second. But as another shooting occurred in Kenosha, where a black man was shot in the back 6 or 7 times or something like that in Kenosha, and then what happened right on the heels of that was the Milwaukee Bucks, who, of course, Kenosha is like right, I think it's south of Milwaukee a little bit. I've got to get my Midwest like geography back online. But basically, you know, protests obviously erupted again. And then I think there was some militia that arrived, and there was some shootings that happened, and other people were killed and stuff like that. But then the Milwaukee Bucks decided to boycott their game to make sure that attention was going in the right place, essentially. And then a bunch of other sports teams, I think, including the Milwaukee Brewers and baseball and some football teams, took off practice. But it was kind of an interesting show of solidarity and support for this message that has been so much a part of this 2020. And I think that we have to recognize that that's not just that Mars is square to Saturn and Mars is square to Pluto, and there's this eruptive display of violence. And it is interesting that Mars is about to go retrograde, and you see the potential for the NBA season was, well, apparently yesterday they were thinking of canceling it. Today I read in the news that the playoffs will be back on, but that the players had serious conversation about perhaps walking out on the season as basically a message. So that's all like very much, you know, you could look at the Mars signature and see that all over the place. You know, what I find really interesting is that when George Floyd was murdered, and I guess not far from where I live in Minneapolis now, and I haven't been over to, I think it's Powderhorn area, South Minneapolis, but it wasn't far from, you know, this area of the state. And that happened as Venus was retrograde. And of course, it's toned by Jupiter in its fall, which often shows stagnation, corruption, degeneration, decay in systems, whether it's religions or governments or, you know, the justice system or what have you. And there's also kind of an outcry when Jupiter is in Capricorn for a restoration of morality, or to fix broken systems, or when ideologies become corrosive, or they've reached their shelf life, and change somehow happens rapidly because of this very vivid and pronounced example of like moral degeneration. That's very much in line with Jupiter in Capricorn. And it can deteriorate into not just it can create systemic change, not all at once, of course, but it can create some change, and at the same time, it can also amplify reactionary cycles of violence, which we've also seen. So, but what we forget is that Venus was in the mix of all of that. It was a Venus retrograde, and Venus is now coming back into a very dynamic and cathartic and intense opposition with Pluto and Saturn, and square to Mars. And so it's important to remember that when Venus gets, when Venus gets mixed up in these very conflicted aspects with, heavy and intense planets like Pluto or like Mars, you will often see the deterioration of relationships. You will often see, violence and social unrest, or civic or social disruptions. Because what is Venus? Well, Venus, there we go. Venus is, if you go walking in a park on any, given day. I remember living in New York City and going walking in Central Park and stuff like that, where there's just this general feeling of peace and harmony and beauty in the social civic arena. It's not always that way, we know, but like if you've ever just been on a, like a sunny day in the park, that's Venus. But when Venus comes into squares with Mars, or when Venus comes into oppositions with Pluto or Saturn, typically what you're going to see is that serene, peaceful, sensual, enjoyable, delightful environment or atmosphere in the external world, or in the internal landscape. You're going to see it interrupted. You're going to see the peace is disturbed. That's not always a bad thing, obviously. Sometimes our peace needs to be disturbed. I mean, we can be in la la land, on the couch, like couch potatoes or something, and sometimes we need our peace to be disturbed in order to get off the couch and not stagnate, or whatever the case might be. Remember that Venus is also related to cleanliness and hygiene. And so whenever Venus comes into contact with Pluto, especially, there are these deep subterranean forces that make us confront things that aren't clean. They're not nice. They might make us feel heavy or dark, or they might feel like dirty or ugly. Remember that our sense of beauty, Venus, is rooted in not just what we find pleasing, but what we find pleasing in contrast to what we find ugly or distasteful. So Venus oppositions to Pluto will bring that up. I like this. I don't like this. I desire this beautiful image or scene or lifestyle or article of clothing, or even, for example, I've gotten like 3 or 4 charts recently where people, as Venus is coming into the opposition with Pluto, horary charts where people are asking about different kinds of cosmetic surgeries. Right? Why? Well, tis the season, right? It's like, well, I don't like how this looks, or I don't like how this appears, and I want to transform it. I want to make it into something better. I want to hide the ugliness, or I want to transform the ugliness. I don't like it. I want something prettier, or whatever the case might be. Now, that could lead to something really good. For example, when ugliness is exposed, it's like, sunshine is the best antibiotic, or whatever. It's like when you bring something ugly up to the light, then you can say, okay, well, it's time to beautify. I went for a walk yesterday around the lake, and one of the lakes here in Minneapolis. There's several. There's a lot of lakes in Minnesota. So I went for a walk around one of the lakes I was chanting as I was walking, and I noticed, because I had been there the day before as well, I noticed that at nighttime, when some protests happened here in Minneapolis as well after the shooting in Kenosha, and in fact, there was another one last night, and I don't think it was something different that happened, and I'm not sure what. I actually got the little notification on my phone saying there was a citywide curfew last night, but I think it was because something else happened, and then it triggered some degree of demonstration that maybe turned violent or something like that. If someone's from the Twin Cities area and knows what happened last night here in the Twin Cities, I'd love to hear what actually occurred, because I haven't really looked into it yet. But at any rate, several nights of sort of like civic social unrest here in the Twin Cities after that shooting in Kenosha. And I was walking around the lake. I noticed that someone had spray painted in probably like 6, 7, 8 places around the lake, different, political slogans, abolish the police, or, Black Lives Matter was there as well. And some others. Some of them were gratuitous, and some of them were like things that I would, I'm like, that looked kind of artistic, and I thought were really beautiful and nice statements. But what was so interesting about it, because it wasn't the graffiti that bothered me. I mean, I guess it's sort of destructive. I mean, these are like walking trails, and clearly they were like the whole walking trail was being filled with this like graffiti iconography or whatever. And I was like, okay, but what was so interesting was walking around and listening to what people were saying as they saw them, and it was interesting. And it was interesting to watch my own reaction. I haven't watched the video of the Kenosha man being shot, because I can't handle just personally, I have a really hard time, as those things really they burn into my mind, and then I have trouble sleeping and things like that. So I don't typically watch them, but I read about them, when things like that happen. And I was watching my own reaction to this like graffiti that was all around the walking trail. And I was like, part of me was like, oh, come on, it's such a nice, beautiful, like walking trail. And some of it looked good, but some of it was just really like ugly and clearly like really angry. And I was like, that was my like aesthetic response. But then I was like, yeah, but you know what? It's happening in response to things that are really angry and ugly. You know what I mean? And so it was this weird, like I had to go through a little inner alchemy and just be like, you know what, I'm just going to listen. I'm just going to watch, and I'm just going to take this in and not have any judgments about it. But I was watching and listening to other people as we were walking around the lake. As I was walking around the lake this time with my japa bag, and people were having all different kinds of responses, basically. And some of them were trying to find a way of being like, this is beautiful. And others were being like, I just don't understand why it has to get so ugly. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not trying to make any kind of statement today about what you should feel about what's happening or anything like that. But what these events do in the collective, and I'm going to talk about the personal in a minute as well, because I don't want this to just be about the collective events happening right now, but at least in the United States. They make us look at what we find attractive and what we find repulsive. And those things become a mirror for us as to what our own inner values are, where our own inner beauty and where our own inner ugliness lies. And that's what's so valuable about a Venus-Pluto opposition. And then, I'm going to get into Venus-Saturn and Venus-Mars a little bit as well. But the Plutonian element that's engaging right now, it has that feeling of the sacred versus the profane, the ugly versus the beautiful. And we have to remember, it's so important to remember what did ancient mystics teach us, that these opposites are, they entail one another, they entangle with one another, so that if you hold what's beautiful so tightly and are so defended against whatever you find to be ugly in contrast to what you find to be beautiful, eventually what you find to be ugly is going to, knock at the door and be like, hi, you can't forget about me. And that's what I was really coming around to. Like, thankfully I had my beads with me. So, it's like, because a lot of the times these are just passing moments where we're just like, ugh. And, and our culture teaches us to be that way too. Our culture is like, what do you like? Just give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Give it a, oh my God, it's fantastic, or, oh, I hate it. So little patience, so little nuance and subtlety. It's hard. It's hard to find beauty if you don't have the patience to look for it beyond just the immediate attraction. Let me taste it. Let me buy it. Let me eat it. Let me smash it in my face, versus like, just get it away. So But this can affect us personally too. This transit can affect us on such a deep personal level in your workspace, your colleagues, your friendships, your lover or your spouse or your children, family members, what attracts us and what repels us. And I remember something when I was a kid. This is like a silly example. I'm just going to stop sharing for a second. When I was a kid, I remember that, one time my mom let me try some of her coffee. Now, I'm not a coffee drinker now, so the story may not be the correct one. I have another one that'll work too, but I tasted it and I was like, I looked at my mom and I was dead serious. I was like, I don't understand how you can drink something that tastes so awful. It was like beyond me. And that was dead serious. I was like, this tastes like poo. Like, why are you drinking this? And I don't understand. And my mom, like, rather than like, she like laughed or whatever, but she like gave me a real answer. And she was like, some things that taste bad at first, you develop a taste for and in time come to really love. And so you have to give it time. You have to like give it time to develop that. And she's like, and you sometimes that doesn't happen until you're a little older, a little bit more mature. Of course, I hated hearing that. You know what I mean? But so I don't drink coffee now. But for example, my wife makes a lot of herbal medicine, and although there are many really good medicinal herbs that she makes. She's got a new video out today. If you go check it out at Skyhouse Herbs. She talks a lot about the concept of herd immunity and herbs and the immune system and things like that. Good new video that she did today. She'll give me really good herbs that I know are going to help me with, some little tweak or adjustment that my system might need. They taste awful, right? They're just like absolutely awful. But what I've come to do is, like my wife has had me do, will be to take a little bit of the herbal medicine and to just sit with it and to really let it just not just be like, it tastes like sticks and mud, and just like, try to, wash away the, just slug some water really quickly or something. But I sit with it for a while now, because she had this thing that she said one time where she said, and it was one of her teachers that said this, I believe, originally, but she said, these are plant spirits. It's plant medicine, and it gets offended. It's because it's real, it's sentient, and it can get offended and not want to work with you as much if you are repulsed by it, and if you act like, oh, this is terrible, and you then strip it of something that's essential to what it is, and try to just pull away to the essence of what you're comfortable with. Like, oh, well, just I like the effect that it gives me, but like, horrible taste. I'm not trying to go over the top with this. Like, some things that are good for you taste crappy, and like you're not gonna like be like, this just tastes like raspberry cordial or like something like that. But it's true though that the things in life that feel really gross to us, that don't taste very good, and taste is a really critical word for Venus, because Venus is representative of the five senses and what is appealing to the five senses, and that what doesn't taste good to us right away is often really good for us later. In fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes happiness in the mode of ignorance, in the mode of passion, and in the mode of goodness. If you would describe ignorance, you could say that it's basically, ignorance is like 40,000 people totally loaded on booze at a sports game, banging their heads against each other or something like that. I know that I go to sports games sometimes, so I'm not trying to be a jerk. But anyway, passion. What is passion? Passion would be like, oh, just, give me my super fit smoothie, because I am just so ambitious and so productive, and I'm only going to eat things that are happy and healthy, but I'm going 100 miles an hour toward happiness and success. And, usually it's some combination of trying to be successful in the world, but also like look good, feel good, like, passion. And it's a hamster wheel, passion is. It just, you're always burning yourself out trying to be happy and together. And then there's happiness in the mode of goodness. And Krishna says that happiness in the mode of goodness, it tastes bad going down, but it comes out later feeling good. And I think it was Hippocrates who said, "Let food be thy medicine," or something like that too. And it was Steve Jobs, when he was dying, that I think quoted Hippocrates. Or I saw a post about this recently, and I think maybe uh, Steve Jobs was saying something very similar when he was dying, which was, when it comes to the end of life, it doesn't matter what you have, it doesn't matter how much you've accomplished. You're kind of leveled, your humanity is put back into perspective. You're leveled down to the common features of your body and your health and your mind and your sanity. And one of the things he said, of course, was like, you should spend less time on the hamster wheel trying to be successful and happy with so much gasoline being poured on the fire, and a little bit more time, eating what's good for you, even if it doesn't necessarily feel good or isn't super extravagant or, whatever. So many teachers have said the same thing in different ways over time, which is that things that may not look good or taste good or feel good are often really good for you and make you feel good if you have some patience and develop some taste for what is good for you. And what I really appreciated about the athletes boycotting their games yesterday was that they said, nope, you should have to take, this is a little bit of a bitter medicine, but everyone should have to take it for a moment to look at what happened, and to just be with it, to listen, to watch, to let yourself feel, because it's really beyond a political issue. To me it is anyway. I don't see it as a political issue. I see it as just a basic issue of human decency. But beyond what happened, we may be faced in our personal lives right now with things that it's like, what? It's a bitter medicine. It's a bitter pill. It doesn't taste good, but it probably is good for you. That's the Plutonian element. When Pluto meets Venus, it's often like that. That can happen in love. Again, it can happen in any sphere of life right now. Look at the Cancer Capricorn axis in your birth chart to get a little bit more insight about it, but it can happen anywhere. So real beauty is something that is usually acquired through small commitments that we make each and every day to do, to hold a relationship to just a pinch of healthy bitterness. Health, real happiness, real harmony. It's something that should be like a subtle wave that's carrying us through all things, so that whatever comes at us, we're able to harmonize and ride along with it. But where does that kind of baseline, that deep underground sort of river of peace come from? Well, it comes from that's a deep, dark place. It's a deep, fertile place within. But deep, dark, fertile places are muddy. You know what I mean? And they're not. They sustain what looks so beautiful above, like gardens or flowers or trees in the sunshine, right? But there's this deep substrata. So cultivating that is really important to cultivating real lasting happiness. Just like Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, again, the stuff that is going to make you happy doesn't taste good going down, but it feels good when it's later, when it's integrated and coming out. And whereas, happiness in the mode of passion, what is that like? Feels good when you take it, makes you feel bad later. So we have to have some ability to track what's happening. Instant gratification is almost never the correct measure of real Venusian happiness, and Pluto will put us in touch with that, and so will Saturn. Venus and Saturn is like if you talk about Venus also getting into the opposition with Saturn, Venus opposition to Saturn is like a wine that ages over a long period of time. Some people in this, like when I was younger, and I was like in my teen years, I guess, I was really obsessed with Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet because it was so quirky and it was so different. And I was really kind of on track to becoming an English student. And I liked Shakespeare. I liked reading his plays, and I was getting into poetry and stuff like that. Thanks in part to my best friend who was really into those things too at the same time. And that kind of bittersweet, tragic, romance of Romeo and Juliet. It's a tragedy, of course. But one of the things that not a lot of people know unless they've sort of studied Shakespeare a little bit, is that Shakespeare was also, kind of not necessarily glorifying their story. Like we think of star-crossed lovers, but part of what he was also telling us is that there's like a zealous, kind of a zealous, fantastical intensity to youth, and to that kind of burning, smoldering romance that is, just sort of over the top. You know what I mean? And it's not a popular phrase to say, "Love me little, but love me long." Like nobody likes that phrase. Like, no, love me intensely, and let it burn fast and hard and bright, and then it'll fly off the tracks later, and that's fine. That tends to be our motto today too with love. I'm infatuated. I crave instant union with the object of my desire, whether it's a person or whatever. And then again later it burns out. And this is actually a subtle part of the commentary that Shakespeare was making in Romeo and Juliet. So in romantic love, it's the same thing. Saturn with Venus is telling us also, hey, look, when you're thinking, I see people all the time, like probably hundreds of people every year I talk to about relationships. And what is the one thing that I see? Like there's a bunch of patterns that I see all the time, but one of them is very common. It's, I was infatuated with someone, but I realized later that I didn't have anything in common with them, such as, most importantly, my spiritual life. Or some people will, like, I really love astrology, I really love like yoga, or I love being outdoors or whatever, and like I don't share any of those inner life loves with the person that I'm with. And some people, they seem to deal with it okay. But a lot of people, what happens is the initial physical, chemical attraction, whatever it's there for, whatever a person thinks it's going to satisfy, in time, what they find is that level of infatuation wears off. And that if you don't have a friendship built, if you don't have common ways of sharing your inner life with someone else, that things have a way of drying up. And that is a Venus-Saturn dynamic. Are there areas in your life where you've poured so much emotion into it, Venus in Cancer, so much love, so much care, so much nourishment, only to find that it's dried up? You're meeting the cold, hard reality. This isn't what I thought it was. This doesn't provide me with what I thought it could. And, or on the other side of it, are you realizing in order to go the long road with someone, in order to age like a fine wine over a long period of time, I need someone who, maybe the intensity isn't as strong. It shouldn't be nothing, probably, right? But I need someone that also feels like a friend, feels like a companion. In fact, in one of the things in the yogic tradition that I really love, and I know this will be controversial, I don't expect everyone to agree with me, so please don't feel like we need to get into a big debate about this, but in Bhakti Yoga, part of what we're learning to do is to be in better control of our sexual energy in general. It's a good Venus-Saturn topic. Because it is something like anything in our bodies or our minds as a craving or a desire, that it can, when it takes over, that any form of desire, when it takes over, can sort of really take us out of our center and crash us pretty hard. So it's one of the aspects of the senses that we're learning to control in yoga, is the sexual desire feature. Now, to be repressive or restrictive would not be a good thing. And my teachers certainly have never said that, right? But there is this idea that as we age in a relationship that is centered on yoga together, in whatever, romantic relationship of any kind, let's just use it in the context of marriage, that as we age together, gradually, just we are a couple could be like a safe space, a sort of sanctuary to sanctify our desires with each other. But that as we age, our path should naturally come to be more focused on our spiritual off-ramp into the next body, next lifetime, next stage of our journey, and that we should be facilitating us, each one another, being focused on that and gradually letting go of more and more of our desires. Now, that's something that looks different for everyone, but one thing that Venus Saturn also says is, if there's something that you can wean yourself off from very gradually, Saturn is like Venus Saturn is like intermittent fasting, right? Let's say that you're someone, and let's just use the sexual connotation again. Like if you're in a relationship and you're having sex like every day of the week, the idea would be to preserve that chi, to kind of preserve that vital force energy, which is so in yoga philosophy, which is like a necessary energy to help you be more focused in meditation and to be cultivating your yoga at a deeper level, that gradually you might drop down to say 5 times a week or 3 times a week or whatever like that as you age together as a couple. And that's something that you do together. Now that's, not for everyone, I get it, right? But it's that kind of moment right now with Venus where we can look and say, maybe I'm going to do a little intermittent fasting of some kind. Not, typically nothing, it doesn't work. We owned a yoga studio for 10 years, did a lot of stuff on nutrition and wellness. And I can tell you right now that the thing that doesn't seem to work is when people cut things out entirely and there's not some kind of, working with the senses versus trying to like quarantine them, right? But that gradual ability to let go of attachments that aren't as good. Again, it doesn't taste good in the beginning, but in the long run, it often feels a lot better. So you don't, and I'm just going to be totally honest. Like, I again, probably, hundreds and hundreds of people that I've seen over the course of my whole career who have come in specifically with eating problems, like overeating or emotional eating or whatever. And that's a really, really tricky one, right? Because, and I'm not like an expert on it, but just hearing people talk about their, let's say food addiction or something like that. I've heard a lot of people talk about food addiction in my career. And it's tricky because you got to eat to live. We can't deny the Venus function. You know what I mean? You got sensuality, beauty, pleasure, happiness in the world. We're not meant to just go like, oh, it's all an illusion. It's all like that. But at the same time, so there's a shift that has to happen. And I've heard so many people talk about this, where you're going from, the phrase that people use is going from living to eat to eating to live. And it's that same idea around pleasure and sensuality that's in the air right now. Now, with Mars in the mix right now, one of the reasons that I'm spending so much time talking about these things, and the feeling that these topics or conversations could be really charged right now and really get like strong, volatile reactions as well, and that's why I'm trying to be really careful, is that Mars is in the mix. This is that moment where it's like, well, I'm just going to go join a boot camp. You know what I mean? Or, so something that much more aggressive could be tempting right now. And I think we should be really careful of that. At the same time, Mars is there to energize and activate and provide us with the incentive to create some kind of deep change in relationship to our desire body. So that's a good thing. Mars can activate that. But Mars can also turn it on, basically. And if Saturn's in the mix, kind of wanting to restrict it, then you have to be really careful. Like when I was in college, I tell you, this transit would have wrecked me, because my pattern in college was like, party, kind of binge party, and then like, go running, like I'm hungover, I'm going to go running, I'm going to get like, I got to like kind of purge myself out, be really clean for like a day or two, because then I had to write a big paper. And then once the big paper was written, I'd like do it all over again. That's very much like Venus square Mars with Saturn and Pluto in the mix, that vacillation between extreme consumption and then extreme restriction. So you have to watch for that as well right now. Okay, I've been talking around this transit for a while, so I'm going to leave it here for the day. There's more to say, of course. Venus and Mars, for example, I hope to talk about that a little bit more down the line. That can be a very erotic and creative tension between the masculine and feminine, or the yin and the yang, regardless of sex or gender orientation. Just that push-pull of Venus and Mars can be really strong and very creative. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more down the line. Now, remember, I'm just advertising pretty regularly now. November 14th, my new class, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, starts. 1-year program in Ancient Hellenistic Astrology. Learn to read birth charts. Last third of the class, about 30 lessons on the year, 2 to 3 hours each in webinar format. They're recorded, so you can participate all around the world if you can't make it live. We have 12 guest lectures that come in. The last third of the class, I do live readings. We break them down and we work them out together so that you can see what a reading looks like and have some modeling for you to take into reading for other people yourself. A lot of people come out of my program, reading for other people right away. I also have a 2nd-year program and a horary program. So there's 3 full years of classes that I offer for people who are like, I love this. I can't get enough of it. And I could see myself doing this. A lot of people, just to be totally honest, astrology starts as your average side hustle. You know what I mean? It's like a side gig. But if you're good at it and you like it, I promise you, like wildfire, like people love astrology. There's not a huge amount of professional astrologers. So it's not like you have to worry about it being an oversaturated market, like say yoga teachers, which even though I love yoga and we trained yoga teachers, like there's a million yoga teachers. There are not a million astrologers. And if there is one thing you can be sure of, it's that if you give someone a reading and they're like, wow, that was really cool, they will tell 3-4 other people about you. My entire career up until I started YouTube was based on word of mouth referral and, blogging online. So it's a pretty, I personally, I wouldn't teach training programs for 10 years if I didn't see so many of my students going out and having success, at least on a kind of part-time basis, doing readings for people and really loving it. So anyway, if it's appealing to you, check it out on my website, nightlightastrology.com. If you've got any questions about the program, info@nightlightastrology.com. There are need-based tuition plans for people who need help. If you're struggling because of due to COVID, of course, you can take advantage of it as well. The early bird rate is also in effect, and then there's a full payment plan as well. All right, that's what I've got for you guys. I hope you're having a good one. Please share your stories with me about Venus, Pluto, what you're experiencing, any other insights you have to share. I love hearing from you guys. All right, take it easy. Bye.